Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. When you are designing or building a house, how much thought are you putting into the garage? If you're like me, the answer is probably not much. And the builder doesn't usually talk it up. You kind of just get what they give you when everything is done, and that's your space. And what it ends up being is a big storage area for everything that doesn't fit in the house. And in many instances, you can't even get both of your cars in, so it can become a worthless space for you. My guest today is Aaron Cash, and his job is to take that disorganized clutter mess that you might be calling your garage and turn it into a great space. I'm George Siegal, and this is the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. Your home is probably your biggest investment, and every week we show you warning signs and solutions to help you protect it. Tell Us How to Make It Better is partnering with the Readiness Lab, the home for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, garages, to me, can be one of the coolest features of a house. The problem for people like me and a lot of other people, by the time we get to that, we've kind of run out of money. So we end up just using it for garbage rather than garage. But you have great ways of turning that around. Tell us what you do to make garages look so great.
Yeah, absolutely. So our business is really focused on maximizing the garage space and the value of the garage space for our clients. And that typically entails us coming up with a custom solution to not use the garage as you suggested, sort of as a dumping ground or as an area that really has very little value and use. So we do that with a number of ways with products like our cabinetry, our floor text coating, wall organizers. But more than just the products and services, is we create the solution that really improves the space, increases the value for the homeowner, and improves their lifestyle.
And one of the things my wife and I do when we're walking through the neighborhood is when you see a garage door open, I mean, naturally you'll look up and you can tell the ones that seem organized versus the ones that just everything is thrown in there like they're hoarders. Psychologically, having that room in order can make a big difference for people, can it? I mean, it really does set the tone for every time you come in and go out of your house if you're going through the garage.
Absolutely. So I've heard many times that the garage is America's front door in terms of how most of us enter and exit our houses. And so whether it's leaving or arriving home, opening that door and seeing a mess is stressful, or it can be stressful. So less mess, less stress, and a solution will improve your lifestyle and maximize the space. So it's a win-win. You get to see something that's attractive and beautiful and clean and organized when you arrive home. Plus, all of your stuff is where you know you put it, and it's easy to find and use.
Now, there's a few areas that I think builders totally blow off, so to speak. One is landscaping, and the other is the garage. In fact, many of the houses I've moved into, a lot of times they don't even fully finish the garage. So it's almost like a blank canvas when you move in. What kind of conditions do you see garages when you come into the process with people?
So it varies. It can be, as you described, completely unfinished. So depending on the climate, there can be, insulation on just interior walls and perhaps sheetrock and taped in mud first coat on those walls in order to meet code with gas proofing. It's the whole room has been drywalled but not finished well. And then there's the extreme with the custom builders typically will finish it to a finished drywall stage, but then they leave it and it may have a coat of primer on it. But you're right. I would agree with you that more often than not, builders, whether it's subdivision homes or custom homes, don't pay much attention or enough attention to the garage space. And it's unfortunate because it's extremely valuable. It's a large open space. It can be used for many purposes. And I would argue that most homeowners, if you had to ask them, would say they would prefer it to be clean, organized, and finished rather than unfinished, disorganized, and dirty.
Yeah, no, I would argue also that they aren't just ignoring it. I don't think they even take care of it. If you're not watching them, that's where they're storing all the paint and all the stuff during the build. So a lot of times the garage floor is in pretty bad shape once the homeowner gets there. So you must find those in some interesting conditions when you come in.
Yeah, with new construction, we typically will see an unfinished concrete floor that has paint on it from painting trim and painting doors and moving in appliances and things like that. So they're not damaged typically in new construction, but they're definitely stained with paint and other chemicals that were used in the construction of the home.
Now, when you do a garage like the one that's in the image behind you, for example, I live in Florida. And so the house is elevated to 10 feet, but the garage is down there well, we're considering it. If we have a flood, that's what's going to be sacrificed. So how does that factor into how much money people should put into their garage or think about their garage?
No, that's an excellent question. And what I would say to that is the products we use are extremely durable. So even in Florida, we don't use melamine cabinetry. So if there is high humidity or flooding in the garage, the product won't get wet. And if it does, it won't swell and start to mold. So our steel cabinetry lines are definitely superior to that of wood or particle board that are often put in the garage by homeowners. And so the longevity is there. And then, you asked the question about sort of how does that play into what people should think about in spending in the garage. I mean, it's really an investment at that point. So if it's something that's going to last, no different than hurricane shutters or hurricane glass for your specific climate, I would argue that getting better quality product for the garage, knowing that you have those elements, is well worth the money.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. What's always frustrating for me is by the time we start thinking about the garage, a lot of times we're going, gosh, we've spent all this money, and we go, well, we'll do it later. But once you get to later, then you just keep kicking it down the road. What is it cost wise, starting from the minimum things you could do to a garage up to I want the Taj Mahal of garages?
Absolutely. So there is quite a range based on what a homeowner needs. I would say that some basic organization is probably in the $2,000 to $3,000 range, and then once you add a floor and potentially some cabinetry, you're in sort of the $10,000 range. And then depending on the size and the amount of product you need in terms of going all out, you can get upwards of $100,000. It's really sky's the limit from there. But most of our projects are that average transformation that runs between $10,000 and $20,000 to complete a nice garage project.
Now, I know there's statistics from realtors and everything. Well, if you put in a pool, if you put in $100,000 pool, maybe you'll get 30,000 more when you go sell your house. What does having a nice finished garage do to the value of a house?
Well, again, I think that the statistics probably are a little bit misleading in terms of what people say 100,000 versus 30,000. I think that number is much higher than it was before COVID, to be honest. And now pools aren't seen as a negative. A pool is almost always a positive if you have one. The garage space, again, without a specific statistic as to the dollar value of return, I would say to you that most people would see value in a finished space. They may not say, well, that's where we would have 100% put our money, depending on what their lifestyle is like. But they would definitely feel that it's much more valuable than not having it. This wouldn't be like a pool, say, if you had young children, and it would be a detriment. There's only upside to having this space finished.
So tell me about the most elaborate garage you've ever done, just so I can feel really even worse about mine.
Yeah, we've
What's
done.
what's the
Go
coolest
ahead.
one? No, I was going to say, tell me the coolest one.
The coolest project I'd say we've done really was built as part of a new build. So it was new construction. And so the architect was involved from the beginning. It was like a subterranean garage. So it was underground that opened up into a large space. And the homeowner, as busy as they were, really, had an appreciation for cars and liked to wash his own cars. So we installed a car washing station, and there was cabinetry for hobbies and things like that. And it was just it wasn't that it was so spectacular with specific finishes. It was just that it was really built out with so many different elements that they really loved. So they had an area where they were using as a lounge, and they had an area where they were using it for ping pong, and they had an area for car washing. And so it really was everything you could imagine beneath the home. So it was quite spectacular.
Yeah, I noticed during COVID, a lot of people were putting a lot of gym equipment in their garages. Do you see that trend still continuing? Because then having that nice floor, having everything put away is even better if you're doing something like that. Are people still doing that?
I would say that it's probably less common than it was during sort of the height of COVID in terms of installing gym equipment. I think many people who were avid gym goers before have returned to the gyms outside the home. What I would say to the purpose of the garage as a gym is that our company doesn't sell gym equipment or furniture for the garage. What we do is we focus on building out the space and the environment for a homeowner to choose what they want to do with the space. So whether that's putting gym equipment in or parking or having gym equipment and being able to park or putting a couch there so that, friends can come over and watch a game. We just create the clean, bright, organized environment so that the homeowner can determine how they want to use the space. And even if they choose how they want to use it today, it can always be adjusted later on, and it's very flexible so that they can repurpose it down the road.
Now, I also see a lot of people here where I live that can't even get their cars in their garage. So the garage is now turned into a storage shed, maybe a workout room, all that stuff's in there. So their cars won't even go in there. Do you see that a lot where people are using the garage for things other than cars?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been to a garage where someone had so many boxes, and then they're like, well, the car, we need to store this car. And I was like, what car? Because it was literally covered with so much stuff that I didn't see it. It was small. It was a small convertible, but I couldn't see it. So yes, I mean, people have accumulated so much stuff that oftentimes storage space is very limited. And typically what we do when we go in for an in-home consultation, we'll talk to the clients about really what they can get rid of, whether that's disposing it, donating it, and then simply determining what they want to keep. And if they want to maximize the space and minimize the clutter, then oftentimes they'll purge a lot of items. And what's left is easily stored and easily organized, so the space is valuable. But not keeping things that you don't use anymore and really donating or throwing away things that no longer have any value to you is oftentimes part of our discussion with our clients in order to make the most of their space and come up with a solution that really meets their needs.
Now, I don't feel like we are hoarders, but when I walk out in my garage, I just see a bunch of stuff and I go, well, I might want to use that someday. Do I want to sell this? Do I want to throw this away? Do I want to give this away? Give me some suggestions of a starting point where I could walk out there and actually make a difference in getting rid of stuff, because it frustrates me every time. I can honestly say it happens every day. If I could have a garage like the one that was behind you, I would do it tomorrow. What could I do? What could the regular person do that just wants to have a more livable space? Where do you start?
I think you'd have to go through your stuff, not as a starting point, like you said, and say, okay, am I going to use this? Do I want to keep it because it has value to me? Or is it simply just something I don't know if I'm going to use down the line? And be somewhat brutal about it. You have limited space, and you have to value that with, the stress you feel when you go and look at it versus possibly having it down the line if you should need it. So you really have to balance that. And then the items that you do want to keep, we can put into containers, or we can put into other storage items that help you organize it. So it doesn't have to be all over the place. It can be put behind closed doors. It can be put on the wall. It can be put overhead, depending on the ceiling height of the garage. And then really, it becomes an open space again that you can use, whether it's for parking, whether it's for working out if you want to use it as a gym, or whether it's just for having a nice clean space to arrive home to every day.
Now, I see also a lot of homes around here that now have the split garages. Part of the garage is on the right side of the house and part of it's on the left side of the house. How does that factor into what you guys do?
It really doesn't. I mean, sometimes it can be, one spouse uses one and another spouse uses another. Sometimes it can be for parking of a vehicle on one and a golf cart on another. We see that often. Or other times it can be like, listen, this is where all of our stuff is going to go. And this is where, we're going to park and we're going to drive in, and it's clutter free. So it really doesn't change our approach to the project. It simply just adds a layer of consideration as to what you want to use, because you really have two separate spaces rather than one garage space. But it also opens up possibilities. So if you're saying to me as a client, I can't decide what I want to throw away and I can't decide what I need to keep or what I want to donate. Okay, well, let's take one space and literally make it clean and organized and bright, and use the second as a storage unit and literally organize as best as you can in that. Or we do both spaces, but then that one's going to have the boxes that you still need to determine what you want to do with it.
Yeah, I always get jealous with these new builds when I see them actually put more depth to the garage, or there's more room on the sides as opposed to just squeezing a couple of cars in there. I imagine it's easier for you guys to come in if there actually was some thought into having space in the garage, as opposed to just we maximized everything inside and we did the minimum with our garage.
Absolutely. And we see that every day. It doesn't matter whether you're buying a home off of plans in a subdivision or you're building a custom home. Architects and builders often don't provide enough space for the garage. So my suggestion would be is if you're working on if you're drafting plans to build a home or you're reviewing plans to build a home, work to add 2 feet in depth and 2 feet in width, because you'll enjoy the extra space once you have it. And it may take a little bit off of the inside. I mean, they always want to maximize the interior space, but really it's not that practical if it's too tight to park, even though they call it a 2-car garage, or you have no space in front or behind the cars when you pull them in, and you really have no usable space when everything's completely full.
Yeah, I don't think people really even think about that, and they probably should, because if you put a water softener in there, if you put, you put some bike racks on the wall, pretty soon you're going, I can't even get a car in here. And it frustrates me that builders don't pay more attention to this, and they're not advising people. So I encourage people to be their own best advocate. You have to be smart when you're buying or building a house and look at those things, and don't reward somebody else's crappy job of building it. And if you're building it, keep these things in mind.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, most builders, especially ones that are doing pre-construction and pre-planned architecture, are just looking at maximizing the square footage of the house, which is not including the garage typically. So they really don't put enough attention, and they don't make enough consideration for that space you would need to use it once they have a purchaser or buyer. So if you're your own advocate, yes, I would reconsider the size of it. Consider adding 2 feet in depth and 2 feet in width, because it'll make the world of difference when you want to actually use the space.
And you really can't go back and ask for that later. You got one shot.
You can't add a couple feet.
I know it's frustrating. There's so many things when I look at that picture that I want, but probably not going to happen today. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on. I'm jealous of anybody that has a nice garage, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you today.
Thank you for joining me today on the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. All of Aaron's contact information is in the show notes, and all my contact information is there as well. And if you enjoyed what you were listening to, please become a subscriber, share the link with somebody, and even leave a review. There's also a contact form. So if you have an interesting building or remodeling story that you'd like to share, fill out the contact form, let me know, and I'd love to have you as a guest on the podcast. There's also a link to my documentary film, The Last House Standing, and I hope you'll check that out. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.